In this episode, we dive into the most horrifying shark attacks, from a surfer who surfed knowing it was the peak of great white season to a tourist who tried escaping a cage dive after seeing a large shark. But first, let's start with the story of two little sisters who got eaten by sharks. The morning of August 12, 2014, dawned with perfect beach conditions at Sand City Beach, California. Golden sunlight danced across the Pacific surface, and gentle offshore breezes created the kind of pristine waves that made families flock to the coastline. For the Walsh family, this was meant to be the perfect ending to their summer vacation. One last day of ocean fun before returning to their routine in Monterey. Emma Walsh, 7, and her little sister, Chloe, 5, were the kind of children who lived for the water. Both were confident swimmers who had spent the entire week mastering their boogie boarding skills at safer, more crowded beaches. Their father, Dr. Michael Walsh, was a marine biologist at the prestigious Monterey Bay Aquarium, making him intimately familiar with the local marine ecosystem, including the great white sharks that patrolled these waters. Their mother, Sarah, was an elementary school teacher who had carefully planned every detail of their vacation. The girls were inseparable, with Emma taking on the protective big sister role, while Chloe's infectious laughter could be heard echoing across any beach they visited. The family had spent the morning packing their beach gear one final time, the girls excitedly discussing their plans to catch the biggest wave ever on their last day. Dr. Walsh had checked the marine conditions report that morning, noting the presence of elephant seals in the area, but dismissing it as routine information. Emma's board was bright pink with purple stripes, while Chloe's was yellow with cartoon dolphins, gifts from their grandparents the previous Christmas. But on this fateful day, the family made a decision that would change their lives forever. Instead of returning to their usual crowded beach, they chose an isolated section of Sand City Beach during the late afternoon golden hour, precisely when great white sharks become most active in their hunt for prey. Dr. Walsh, despite his expertise, was focused on giving his daughters one last perfect beach experience and overlooked the warning signs, elephant seals hauling out nearby, the isolated location, and the time of day when predators ruled the waters. At 5:20 p.m., as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Emma and Chloe paddled their boogie boards 75 yards offshore into 12 feet of crystal clear water. Their dark wetsuits and the silhouettes of their boards created the perfect illusion. From below, they looked exactly like young elephant seals, the preferred prey of the massive great white sharks that patrolled this coastline. The girls were laughing and calling to each other, completely unaware that they were being observed from the depths below. Great white sharks possess one of nature's most sophisticated sensory systems, capable of detecting a single drop of blood in 25 gallons of water and sensing the electrical impulses of a beating heart from over 100 yards away. When hunting, they rely primarily on vision and mistake identification, approaching potential prey from below, where the silhouette against the surface light triggers their investigative response. Their hunting strategy is simple but effective: a single powerful bite to determine if the target is suitable prey, followed by retreat to allow the victim to weaken before returning to feed. A 14-foot great white, drawn by the nearby seal colony, approached from the depths with the silent efficiency that had made its species the ocean's apex predator for millions of years. The attack came without warning. The great white struck Emma first in a classic investigative bite, its massive jaws clamping down on her and her board with enough force to launch her small body through the air. Her terrified scream pierced the afternoon calm as she hit the water, blood immediately beginning to cloud the pristine blue around her. The shark, following its instinctual behavior, immediately released Emma and retreated to assess whether she was suitable prey. But the damage was already done. The single bite had caused massive trauma to her torso and leg. Chloe, only 20 feet away, heard her sister's cry and began paddling frantically toward her, her movement and Emma's blood in the water maintaining the shark's interest in the area. Dr. Walsh, who had been watching proudly from shore 200 yards away, immediately dove into the surf and began swimming toward his daughters with desperate strokes. Sarah screamed from the beach, alerting other beachgoers to the emergency unfolding in the water. Nearby surfers, alerted by the screams and commotion, paddled toward the scene as fast as they could. The great white, now confused by the multiple targets and increased activity, made a second investigative approach toward Chloe before ultimately departing the area. Typical behavior when great whites determine their target targets aren't seals. The rescue that followed was heroic and swift. Surfers reached the girls within 3 minutes, immediately pulling them from the water and applying pressure to their wounds while calling for emergency assistance. Emma, who had sustained the more severe injuries from the direct bite, was airlifted to a trauma center where she underwent multiple surgeries. Despite the medical team's best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries after 2 days in intensive care. Chloe survived with severe lacerations to her leg and arm, requiring months of physical therapy but making a full recovery. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine biology community, with Dr. Walsh struggling to reconcile his scientific understanding of shark behavior with the personal devastation of losing his daughter. The family eventually became advocates for shark conservation and beach safety education, understanding that the great white had simply been following its natural instincts. But while this family learned the hard way about the ocean's apex predators, another encounter was about to unfold in the pre-dawn darkness, where a young surfer would face the ultimate test of survival against nature's perfect killing machine. October 3rd, 2015, brought an eerie calm to Surf Beach in Lompoc, California. A thick marine layer had rolled in overnight, creating the kind of mysterious, fog-shrouded conditions that experienced surfers both loved and feared. The visibility was poor, but the waves were clean and consistent, exactly the kind of setup that drew dedicated surfers to paddle out before the rest of the world awakened. Tyler Brooks, 22, was the epitome of a California surfer, a UC Santa Barbara student with sun-bleached hair and the kind of easy confidence that came from years of riding waves. Tyler had been surfing competitively since high school and worked part-time at a local surf shop to fund his passion. He was known among his friends for his dawn patrol sessions, those early morning surfs when the ocean belonged entirely to those brave enough to face the unknown conditions. Tyler had been surfing this particular break for 2 years and considered himself intimately familiar with its moods and dangers. That morning, Tyler had woken at 5:30 a.m. in his shared apartment near campus, quietly gathering his wetsuit and board while his roommates slept. He'd grabbed a quick energy bar and coffee, checking the surf reports on his phone that showed promising conditions despite the marine layer. His girlfriend had texted him the night before, asking him to wait for her to join him, but Tyler was eager to catch the early session before his afternoon classes. But Tyler made a critical error in judgment that morning. Despite knowing that October was peak great white season along the California coast, and despite recent shark sightings reported by other surfers, he chose to paddle out alone. The nearby elephant seal rookery, just 300 yards south of his position, was in the middle of pupping season, a time when massive great whites patrolled the area like underwater sentinels, hunting for the protein-rich seals that represented their preferred prey. At 6:45 a.m., as the first pale light began to penetrate the marine layer, Tyler paddled through the murky water to his favorite spot 100 yards offshore. The poor visibility meant he could barely see 10 feet in any direction, but he knew the break well enough to navigate by feel and sound. He sat on his board in the lineup, waiting for the next set of waves, completely unaware that he was being observed from below by one of the ocean's most efficient predators. Great white sharks are ambush predators that rely heavily on the element of surprise, typically attacking from directly below at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour. Their attacks are so explosive that they can launch their entire 2-ton body completely out of the water. A 15-foot great white shark, drawn to the area by the nearby elephant seal colony, had been patrolling these waters since before dawn. To the shark's ancient sensory system, Tyler's silhouette against the dim morning light looked exactly like a young elephant seal, the perfect target for an investigative strike. The attack was swift and powerful. The great white struck from directly below with explosive force, its jaws clamping down on Tyler's leg in a single, crushing bite. The impact lifted Tyler partially out of the water before the shark immediately released him and retreated. Classic great white behavior when the predator realizes its target isn't a seal. Tyler managed one agonized scream that echoed across the foggy coastline as he found himself in the water with a severely damaged leg, his surfboard floating nearby in pieces. A jogger on the beach, barely visible through the marine layer, heard Tyler's cry and immediately called 911. Despite the poor visibility, Tyler's survival instincts kicked in. Using his remaining strength and his damaged surf surfboard as flotation, he began swimming toward shore, leaving a trail of blood that could have attracted the shark back. Fortunately, the great white had already departed the area, following typical post-attack behavior. Tyler's competitive swimming background proved crucial in those terrifying minutes as he fought to stay conscious and keep moving toward shore. He used techniques from his water safety training, controlling his breathing and conserving energy while applying pressure to his wounded leg. The cold water actually helped slow his blood loss, though hypothermia was becoming a serious concern. Coast Guard rescue swimmers reached Tyler within 15 minutes, finding him conscious but in severe shock from blood loss. The single bite had caused massive damage to his leg, severing major arteries and crushing bone. But quick medical response and Tyler's own determination kept him alive during the critical first hour. He was airlifted to a trauma center where surgeons worked for 8 hours to save his leg and his life. Tyler survived the attack, but required multiple surgeries and months of rehabilitation. He eventually returned to surfing, though never again alone, and always with increased respect for the ocean's apex predators. His experience highlighted the extreme danger of solo surfing during peak great white season. However, while Tyler's story had a positive outcome, another waterman was about to discover that creating a blood trail in predator-rich waters could lead to an encounter with an even more aggressive species of shark. May 18th, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the waters off Islamorada in the Florida Keys. The sun blazed overhead in a cloudless sky, and the crystal-clear water offered visibility extending 60 feet in every direction. Ideal conditions for spearfishing in one of America's most productive fishing grounds. The gentle current and calm seas made it a perfect day for freediving, but beneath the surface, apex predators were already beginning to stir. Carlos Mendoza, 28, was living his dream as head chef at one of the Keys' most exclusive restaurants, where his reputation for serving the freshest local fish had made him a rising star in the culinary world. Carlos was passionate about sourcing his own ingredients, spending his weekends spearfishing to provide unique catches for his restaurant's special menus. His friends described him as meticulous and safety-conscious, though he occasionally dove solo when his schedule didn't align with his regular diving partners. That morning, Carlos had loaded his boat with all his spearfishing gear, including his custom-made spear gun and emergency flotation device. He'd planned to meet his regular diving partner, but a last-minute family emergency had left Carlos diving alone. He'd considered postponing the trip, but the perfect conditions and his restaurant's need for fresh fish for the weekend menu convinced him to proceed solo. Carlos made a decision that would put him in extreme danger. He continued spearfishing alone after successfully catching several large fish, creating an extended blood trail in waters known to be patrolled by tiger sharks. At 2:15 p.m., Carlos had been diving for 3 hours in the productive waters 4 miles offshore. His success had been remarkable. 3 large fish hung from the stringer attached to his weight belt, including a sizable grouper and 2 snappers that would have been the pride of any spear fisherman. But with each successful catch, Carlos was unknowingly creating a blood trail that extended over 100 yards as he moved between dive spots. Tiger sharks are known as the wastebaskets of the sea because they will eat almost anything, from sea turtles and seals to license plates and tin cans. They possess incredibly powerful jaws, capable of crushing sea turtle shells, and are responsible for the second highest number of attacks on humans after great whites. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are less likely to release their prey after an initial bite, making encounters with them particularly dangerous for humans. Fatigue was beginning to set in from repeated deep dives to 40 feet, and Carlos was resting at the surface, floating on his back while catching his breath before his next dive. The blood from his catch continued to seep into the water around him, creating an olfactory beacon that could be detected by sharks from over a mile away. He was completely unaware that an 11-foot tiger shark had been following his scent trail for the past 15 minutes, closing in with the patient determination of a perfect predator. Carlos had just finished eating a quick snack and was preparing to make one final dive before heading back to shore when he noticed the water around him had become unusually still. Fish that had been abundant throughout the day had suddenly disappeared, and an eerie quiet had settled over the area. Classic signs that a large predator was nearby, though Carlos didn't immediately recognize the warning signs. The attack came suddenly as Carlos prepared for another dive. The tiger shark struck from below, its powerful jaws clamping down on Carlos's leg and the fish stringer simultaneously. Unlike a great white's typical bite and release pattern, the tiger shark maintained its grip, thrashing violently as it tried to secure what it perceived as a large, struggling prey item. Carlos fought desperately, using his spear gun to strike the shark's head while trying to free himself from its jaws. The tiger shark's grip was powerful, but after nearly 30 seconds of struggle, it released Carlos and focused on the fish stringer, which it quickly consumed. Carlos, severely injured but conscious, managed to inflate his emergency flotation device and activate his distress beacon. His dive buddy, who had been fishing from their boat 300 yards away, heard the commotion and immediately started the engine, racing toward Carlos's location. He reached the scene within 2 minutes, finding Carlos conscious but bleeding heavily from deep lacerations to his leg and torso. The tiger shark had departed with its meal, following typical behavior after securing food. Emergency medical response was immediate, with Coast Guard helicopters airlifting Carlos to a trauma center within 45 minutes of the attack. He survived after multiple surgeries and months of recovery, though he never returned to solo spearfishing. However, while Carlos learned to respect the ocean's predators through painful experience, another victim was about to discover that even military training couldn't protect against the ocean's most unpredictable predator. July 9, 2017, dawned hot and humid at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida. The previous night's thunderstorms had finally cleared, leaving behind calm seas but murky water conditions that should have raised red flags for the planned training exercise. The heavy rains had created freshwater runoff that turned the normally clear bay water brackish, exactly the environment that attracts one of the ocean's most aggressive and unpredictable predators. Petty Officer Sarah Kim, 25, was the kind of Navy diver that instructors pointed to as an example of excellence. With 4 years of military diving experience and over 200 training dives logged without incident, Sarah was known for her calm professionalism and meticulous attention to safety protocols. Her fellow divers respected her expertise in underwater demolition, and she had recently been selected for advanced training that would have advanced her career significantly. That morning, Sarah had arrived early at the dive facility to conduct pre-dive equipment checks and review the training objectives with her team. She'd noticed the murky water conditions during her preliminary assessment, but trusted that the marine wildlife reconnaissance had been properly conducted. The training exercise was part of a critical certification program, and postponement would have meant weeks of rescheduling for the entire team. The Navy training exercise proceeded despite conditions that, in hindsight, should have triggered additional safety protocols. While marine wildlife reconnaissance was conducted, the recent storm conditions and brackish water created an environment that was particularly attractive to bull sharks, aggressive predators that had likely moved into the bay following the freshwater inflow and abundant bait fish stirred up by the storms. At 10:30 a.m., during what should have been a routine underwater navigation exercise, Sarah found herself separated from her dive partner in 15 feet of murky water. The storm runoff had reduced visibility to less than 8 feet, making it challenging but not impossible to maintain visual contact with her teammate. Following standard protocol, Sarah surfaced to regroup and signal her position, but she found herself 100 yards from the training boat in water that had been transformed by the freshwater inflow. Sarah had been executing a complex underwater demolition simulation when the separation occurred. Her dive partner had been investigating a training target on the opposite side of a submerged structure when the current shifted, carrying Sarah further from their planned route. She'd attempted to signal underwater using standard hand signals, but the murky conditions made visual communication impossible beyond a few feet. Bull sharks are unique among shark species because they can tolerate both fresh and salt water, allowing them to venture far up rivers and into bays where other sharks cannot survive. They are responsible for more attacks on humans than any shark species except great whites, and their aggressive territorial nature makes them particularly dangerous in shallow, murky water. A 9-foot bull shark, drawn into the bay by the freshwater flow and the abundance of bait fish stirred up by the storm, had been patrolling the area since dawn. When Sarah surfaced, her movements and the the electrical impulses from her equipment immediately attracted the predator's attention. Bull sharks are known for their aggressive investigative behavior, especially in brackish water, where they feel most comfortable. The attack was swift, but followed the typical bull shark pattern of a single powerful bite. The shark struck Sarah at the surface, its jaws clamping down on her torso before immediately releasing her. Investigative behavior similar to great whites, but with the bull shark's characteristic aggression. Sarah's emergency beacon activated automatically as she fought to stay conscious, her military training helping her remain calm despite the severe trauma. Sarah's years of military conditioning proved crucial in those first critical moments. Despite the shock and pain, she managed to maintain her position at the surface and control her breathing, preventing panic that could have worsened her situation. She used her emergency whistle to signal distress while applying pressure to her wounds with techniques learned in combat first aid training. Her dive partner surfaced 45 seconds later and immediately called for emergency extraction while applying direct pressure to Sarah's wounds. The support boat reached her location within 3 minutes, and the dive team's immediate first aid response was textbook perfect. Sarah remained conscious throughout the rescue, her military conditioning helping her survive the initial trauma and blood loss. Emergency medical response was rapid and professional. Sarah was airlifted to the Naval Hospital within 20 minutes, where trauma surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage from the bull shark's bite. She survived the attack, but required multiple surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. After 18 months of recovery, she returned to limited duty, eventually becoming an instructor in dive safety protocols. The incident led to immediate changes in Navy diving protocols, including enhanced marine life surveys before all training exercises in coastal waters and mandatory buddy system enforcement in low visibility conditions. Sarah's survival highlighted both the importance of proper emergency response and the unpredictable nature of bull shark encounters in brackish water. But while Sarah's military training and quick medical response saved her life, another victim was about to discover that sometimes the greatest danger comes not from wild predators, but from our own overconfidence. September 14th, 2018 brought perfect conditions to the Neptune Islands off South Australia. Crystal clear water, calm seas, and the kind of visibility that made cage diving operators smile with anticipation. The Southern Ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, its deep blue surface hiding one of the world's most concentrated populations of great white sharks. For tourists seeking the ultimate adrenaline rush, there was no better place on Earth to come face to face with the ocean's apex predator. Jennifer Park, 31, was living out her bucket list dreams during a solo vacation to Australia. A successful marketing executive from Los Angeles, Jennifer had worked tirelessly for years to afford this once-in-a-lifetime trip, and cage diving with great whites represented the pinnacle of adventure tourism for her. She was a certified scuba diver with 30 logged dives, mostly in the tropical waters of the Caribbean and Hawaii. But she had never encountered anything more dangerous than a reef shark. Jennifer had spent the previous evening at the dive operator's briefing session, watching videos of previous cage diving expeditions and learning about great white behavior. She'd been fascinated by the footage of massive sharks gliding past the protective cages, their powerful forms moving with surprising grace through the water. The dive operator had emphasized safety protocols repeatedly, but Jennifer was focused more on the excitement than the warnings. The cage diving operation was professional and safety-focused, with multiple backup systems and experienced dive masters. Jennifer had undergone thorough safety briefings and was equipped with proper emergency signaling devices. The cage itself was a robust steel structure designed to keep tourists safe while allowing close observation of great whites with multiple exit points and constant surface support. At 11:45 a.m., during what had started as a routine cage diving session, the ocean around the Neptune Islands suddenly became a theater of primal power. A massive 16-foot great white shark, larger than any the crew had seen that season, approached the cage with the confident curiosity typical of dominant predators. The shark began displaying classic investigative behavior, circling the cage and occasionally bumping it with its snout, normal behavior that tourists paid thousands of dollars to witness. Great white sharks are naturally curious predators that investigate unfamiliar objects in their territory through physical contact, using their snouts and mouths to gather information about potential threats or prey. They have no hands to explore with, so they use their most sensitive organ, their mouth to investigate. This behavior, while appearing aggressive to humans, is simply how great whites explore their environment and determine whether something poses a threat or opportunity. Their investigative nature has been documented countless times, with most encounters ending peacefully once the shark determines the object is neither food nor threat. Jennifer, initially thrilled by the close encounter, began to feel overwhelmed as the massive predator continued its investigation. The shark's size and proximity were far more intense than anything she had experienced in her previous diving adventures. When the great white made a particularly close pass, bumping the cage more forcefully than before, Jennifer made a critical error in judgment that would change everything. The shark's massive eye, black and emotionless, seemed to stare directly at Jennifer through the cage bars, creating a primal fear response that overrode her training. Her heart rate spiked, and she began hyperventilating through her regulator, a dangerous condition that could lead to panic and poor decision-making underwater. Instead of remaining calm and following the safety protocols that required staying inside the cage at all times, Jennifer panicked and attempted to signal for immediate surface evacuation. In her anxiety, she moved too quickly toward the top of the cage, inadvertently positioning herself near the cage opening just as the great white made another investigative pass. The dive master immediately recognized the dangerous situation and moved to guide Jennifer back to the center of the cage. The shark, responding to Jennifer's sudden movement and her position near the cage opening, made contact with her arm as she reached upward. The bite was investigative rather than predatory, a single, powerful clamp that immediately released when the shark determined she wasn't prey. However, the damage from even an investigative bite from a 16-foot great white was severe, the serrated teeth leaving deep lacerations that required immediate medical attention. The dive master inside the cage immediately activated emergency protocols, applying direct pressure to Jennifer's wounded arm while signaling for immediate surface evacuation. The great white, having completed its investigation and determining that the cage and its occupants posed no threat or food opportunity, departed the area following typical post-contact behavior. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but those moments would be etched in Jennifer's memory forever. Surface support crew had Jennifer out of the water within 90 seconds of the incident, their emergency response training proving invaluable in the critical first minutes. The boat's medical officer, specifically trained in shark bite trauma and equipped with advanced first aid supplies, immediately stabilized Jennifer's arm and controlled the bleeding while the captain radioed for emergency medical evacuation. Emergency medical response was immediate and professional. Jennifer was airlifted to Adelaide's trauma center, where surgeons worked to repair the damage to her arm and shoulder. The medical team's quick response and Jennifer's overall good health contributed significantly to her positive outcome. Jennifer survived the encounter, but required multiple reconstructive surgeries and months of physical therapy. She eventually regained most of the function in her arm, though she never returned to diving. Her experience led to enhanced safety protocols for cage diving operations, including mandatory panic management training and improved cage designs that minimized the possibility of tourist shark contact. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.